fight card, Justin Tafa and Jared Vanderaa. The things that I like about this fight are definitely the first round. I think this could be the most exciting first round on the entire card. I think that Vanderaa, when you look at the way he fights, he forces a classic team quest, right? I have a funny story about this, but I went into some pretty deep footage of Vanderaa over the last little few fights that he's had, and I always knew he was from Team Quest, but I always really thought that he kind of looked like Sal Malvi and all that kind of stuff. And hold and behold, there is actual footage of them training together, the mats multiple times. They seem very, very close. I mean, they could pass for brothers, man. Even the way he strikes, it looks just like him. It's actually kind of funny. But when I found that out, I never got a chance to kind of share that story. But it's really cool to see that Team Quest style of fighting still be in there with those two. And on the flip side, that Team Quest style of fighting does have some holes in its game in terms of being that complete fighter, because the wrestling base is great, but you have to be that kind of athlete that can do it for 5 rounds if you're going to really succeed at it. Someone that I think of is Chad Mendes, man. Chad Mendes in his prime was one of those wrestlers that always comes to my mind as a guy who was really able to do everything, but he had the energy to really, be a certain type of fighter for 5 rounds, unless your name was Jose Aldo. And that's what made him so good to me. Okay, Conor McGregor as well. But outside of that short notice fight, I really think that that's where I think that the wrestling needs to be used more. So everyone says, best base to have in this competition, but that also comes from a defensive, aspect of things. If you're a striker, you want good wrestling to avoid taking any type of damage towards the ground game and keep the fight standing. In this case, I think that Justin Tafa has the ability to avoid any big opportunities in the first round. He's smaller, significantly smaller. He's going to have to deal with some of those kicks coming up. He's going to have to deal with some good jabs. But if he can get through that, get into boxing range, especially in the second and third rounds, if he gets through the first, it's a big win for him. I think that is where he can win the fight, second and third rounds, even if he can't finish it, which I still think he should be able to. Vanderaa has shown, significant abilities to tire out. I mean, I want to give him credit. The Harry Hunsucker fight was something that you just noticed him take out a very tired fighter towards the end of that first round. But then you look at the Spivak fight, right? Maybe they kind of toss him to the wolves with that one a little bit, because Spivak has really been proving himself when you're taking on guys like Tai Tuivasa, who's now, rewriting his career completely. It's one of those things where you really want to ask yourself, was that a tough fight for Vanderaa in the first place? But now he's getting someone that's a little bit more on the come up. And I think that that's where it's going to be a little tough, right? Justin Tafa, it's 4-2. His career is very easy to kind of go back and take a look at, right? You look at the Yorgan De Castro fight, that exact same setup. I kind of brought this up the last time he fight, but it's almost like he learned from it very, very quickly, because he goes and gets a huge win of his own in the exact same way. And that's what I absolutely loved about his game, is that you can kind of see that patience brewing. You can see that, he's able to read the fight. With our boy Carlos Felipe, that was one of the most beautiful fights, right, of last year when those two kind of went at it. I really enjoyed that boxing range fight. Put the heads together and just, I loved it. I loved every second of that. And, split decision loss. Great fight. I don't think that's one MMA, man. 4-2, obviously you want to maybe turn that into a 5-1 instead. But I think that when you look at the losses, there's definitely things to learn. The Juan Adams fight was case in point of how well he learned, how to change his game up in terms of being patient. I think that was the major difference. Yorgan De Castro was in a situation where I think that he kind of lost his footing there and was a little bit less, disciplined than he should have been. Now he goes against a guy like Jared Vanderaa, who's going to welcome a brawl. I think that if it goes into the later rounds, Tafa should have a much, 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 much higher significance in terms of just output, power, all that stuff. I think that if he even wanted to take it to the ground, maybe he could do some damage via ground and pound and keep the fight, top position, that kind of thing. Now, going to the first round, he's got to avoid the power shots. He's got to avoid the ground game. I think that if he's on his back for too long in the first round, not only is Vanderaa going to use up a lot of his energy to land big blows, but could also tire Tafa out for how hard he's going to make him work. That's the big part of his game that I think that's going to be tough to overcome. He's shown great success in the first round in most of his fights, but he does fade. I think that's going to be one of the best parts of that card. That first round, keep an eye on it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. Outside of that, I mean, there's a couple of things I did want to talk about, and it's like Fau Vake, the guy who got jumped in New Zealand, and like they're taking this to the court level of trying to change these laws because supposedly, not supposed, but Australia has enacted the sucker punch law, let's call it that, and New Zealand has not, and it's basically causing gang violence in some areas, but in this case, a guy just got jumped by 4 dudes for no reason, got punched in the head. Now he's on life support. The entire MMA community is now, you know, trying to support this whole case, and it's connected to big names like Israel Adesanya, Brad Riddell, Kai Kara France. Now guys like Justin Tafa are fighting for that difference, right? I think it's really, really important to kind of spread that situation, because that was a promising young fighter with a family of his own, and it sucks to see this kind of stuff go down. And for the fact that that's kind of a law that's not even getting passed when it's being put into, you know, some optionary like types of periods, that's kind of crazy to even think about. But all in all, like, getting back to the fight, I think Tafa has some nice little momentum to fight for on his shoulders. That's going to give him some extra energy in that. Classic option here where I like to bring up the 100% offensive takedown versus the 100%, you know, takedown defense. I mean, are these the kind of guys that are doing the opposite? Probably not. So that's where I kind of like to see that showcase showdown. Ooh, shout out Price is Right. But I think that's the beautiful part, where I think these guys are going to be able to showcase just what they can do and who can come out with the win. Now, overall, do I believe that this fight should be closed via lines? I think so. I think that Vanderaa could have success in the first round and really keep the fight in his game if he's able to tire out Tafa and avoid any big shots, boxing range, things like that. On the flip side, we kind of touched on Tafa pretty clearly. So without further adu, baby. Yeah, Tafa coming in at -205, and now looking at -175 to a -190, kind of jumping all over the board there. +175 for Vanderaa to a +150 now. I think that's pretty fair. I thought that it might be a little bit closer, but I can 100% agree with this line. I do think that a parlay between Felicia Spencer and Justin Tafa seems like a really good option here. I would consider that off the bat right now without really looking at the weigh-ins and stuff like that. But obviously line movement, things like that are things that I want to keep an eye on. But without further ado,